The silence in the grand ballroom of the Four Seasons was a physical thing. It was heavier than the crystal chandeliers that dripped light from the ceiling, thicker than the scent of 1,000 white roses. A moment before, the air had been buzzing with the low hum of 1,000 conversations, the clinking of glasses, the self-satisfied chatter of the city's elite. Now, a hush had fallen, so profound you could hear the soft whir of the air conditioning. Every eye, every smartphone camera was trained on the stage. On that stage stood Adama Diop. She was a goddess sculpted from gold and starlight. Her gown, a creation of her own design, clung to her form like liquid sunlight, its fabric a cascade of shimmering lame. But it wasn't just the gown that held them captive. It was the woman in it. Her bearing was one of impossible grace, her shoulders set not with arrogance, but with a quiet, unshakable dignity. Her face, framed by a crown of intricate braids, was serene. Her eyes, dark and deep as a well of secrets, swept across the sea of stunned faces. Beside her, holding the crystal trophy, was Kalen Adebayo. To the world, he was a titan, a tech mogul whose net worth was a number with too many commas for most people to comprehend: $3.7 billion. He was known for his ruthlessness in the boardroom and his almost mythical privacy. Tonight, however, he was not a titan. He was just a man, looking at a woman as if she were the only person in the universe. The look in his eyes was a raw, unguarded mix of adoration, reverence, and a profound, bone-deep gratitude that silenced the entire room. And in that audience, seated at a table far from the stage, a man was physically coming apart. David Dubois felt the blood drain from his face. His heart hammered against his ribs like a trapped bird. The champagne glass in his hand trembled, its contents sloshing over his knuckles. This couldn't be her. It was impossible. The Adama he knew was a creature of thrift store sweaters and worn-out shoes. The Adama he knew was the woman he had discarded, the woman he had called a beautiful dead end, the woman whose handmade gifts he had laughed at. This golden deity on the stage, being honored as the breakthrough entrepreneur of the year, being looked at by Kalen Adebayo like she was a holy relic. It was a vision from a nightmare. His wife, a woman chosen for her father's portfolio, nudged him sharply. "What's wrong with you?" she hissed, her voice a viper's whisper. He couldn't answer. He could only stare, his world tilting on its axis. Kalen Adebayo leaned into the microphone, but his eyes never left Adama's. His voice, usually a commanding baritone that moved markets, was soft, intimate, yet it carried to every corner of the silent hall. He said, "The world sees a brilliant designer, a philanthropist, a business leader, and she is all of those things. But I see the woman who, with nothing to her name but a few dollars and a powerful heart, saved a man's life. Not with money, not with a grand gesture." He paused, and his voice cracked with an emotion so real it was jarring. "She saved my life with a plate of jollof rice and chicken." The room gasped as one. David felt the air leave his lungs. He remembered that day. He remembered her telling him she was making a special meal. Kalen raised the award. "This isn't for the dresses, Adama. This is for the rice. If you love stories where the humble heart is finally crowned and the arrogant are brought low by the weight of their own choices, then you need to subscribe to this channel and hit that notification bell right now. Because the story of how a single act of kindness on a cold, rainy street rewrote destinies is a lesson you will carry with you forever. The payback in this story isn't just sweet, it's legendary. Now, let me take you back to where it all began. 3 years earlier, Adama Diop was not a goddess in gold. She was a 28-year-old woman running on fumes, a single mother held together by caffeine, sheer will, and the fierce, consuming love she had for her 7-year-old daughter, Fana. They lived in a third-floor walk-up apartment in a neighborhood that the city's brochures preferred to ignore. The apartment was small, the paint was peeling, and the radiator clanked like a ghost in chains during the winter. But Adama had made it a home. The air smelled of Senegalese spices and the lemon-scented floor polish she used every Saturday. Fana's colorful drawings were taped to the walls, a gallery of childhood joy. On a small, wobbly table in the corner sat Adama's most prized possession, a second-hand sewing machine. Adama was an artist. Her hands, though often chapped from washing dishes at the diner where she worked her second job, could perform magic with a needle and thread. Back in her village near Dakar, she had learned the art of traditional embroidery from her grandmother. She could weave stories into fabric, her stitches so fine they looked like they had been painted on. It was her gift, her connection to her heritage, her dream. But dreams didn't pay the rent, which was $950 a month. Dreams didn't buy Fana's winter coat or the asthma inhaler she sometimes needed. So, Adama worked. She spent her days as a stockroom clerk at a soulless department store, folding sweaters and tracking inventory for $15 an hour. In the evenings, from 6 p.m. to midnight, she worked as a dishwasher at a greasy spoon diner, the steam and the smell of old frying oil clinging to her hair when she finally stumbled home. She was in love, or so she thought. David Dubois was a junior investment analyst, a man who wore his ambition like a well-tailored suit. He was handsome, charming, and had a smile that was 40% real and 60% calculated charisma. They had met at the diner, where he'd been impressed by her quiet beauty and her accent, which he found exotic. For a year, he had been the bright spot in her grueling life. He would talk about his future, the corner office, the penthouse, the Porsche, and she would listen, her heart swelling with hope that she and Fana could be a part of that future. She poured what little she had into him. She'd save for weeks to buy him a nice bottle of wine. She'd stay up late after her shift, using her precious fabric scraps to sew him custom pocket squares, each one a tiny masterpiece of her craft. The end came swiftly and with a cruelty that left her breathless. It was his birthday. Adama had spent a month saving up. She bought him a beautiful but modest leather-bound journal. Inside, on the first page, she had embroidered his initials, D.D., in a thread of pure gold she had brought with her from Senegal, a thread she had been saving for Fana's wedding dress. It had taken her 20 hours, hunched over her sewing machine after Fana was asleep, her eyes burning with fatigue. She presented it to him in his sleek, minimalist apartment, her heart fluttering. David looked at the journal. He traced the gold embroidery with one finger. Then he let out a short, dismissive laugh. "Adama," he said, his voice laced with a pity that was more insulting than anger. "It's quaint." He set it down on his glass coffee table as if it were contaminated. He began to pace. "Listen, we need to talk. I'm at a point in my life where I need a partner, not a project. I'm networking. I'm meeting important people. I need someone on my arm who reflects my success." He gestured vaguely at her. "And this is not it." The words hit her like stones. "A project?" he continued, his voice gaining a cold momentum. "I'm seeing someone else. Her name is Cassandra. Her father is a senior partner at the firm. Do you understand? It's a strategic move. It's about building a brand. You, with your 2 jobs and your little sewing hobby, you're a beautiful dead end, Adama. A lovely ethnic distraction, but a dead end nonetheless." Tears welled in Adama's eyes, hot and shameful. She couldn't speak. She just stared at him, the man she thought she loved, as he dismantled her worth piece by piece. She reached for the journal, wanting only to retrieve her heart, her hours, her golden thread. "No, leave it," he said, picking it up. He opened it, ripped out the first page with her embroidery, crumpled it into a ball, and tossed it into a wastebasket. "Keep the book. Maybe you can write down your little dreams in it." He walked to the door and held it open. "It's time for you to go." She walked out of his apartment and into the cold night air. No money, no plan, no place to go but her own small, lonely home. She didn't cry on the bus ride. The pain was too deep for tears. It was a hollow ache in her chest. When she got home, she checked on Fana, sleeping soundly, a small smile on her face. Looking at her daughter, Adama made a promise. She would not break. She would not be a dead end. That night, she called her mother in Senegal. Through a crackling connection, she told her everything. Her mother listened patiently, her silence a comforting presence across the continents. When Adama was finished, her voice raw with unshed tears, her mother said only a few words in Wolof, words that had been passed down for generations. "Jochede am njading," she said. "The hand that gives, gathers. It doesn't make sense now, my daughter, but one day it will. Your worth is not in a man's wallet. It is in your hands and in your heart. Remember that." Adama remembered. She wrote the proverb on a slip of paper and taped it to her sewing machine. It became her mantra. 6 months had passed since David had ripped the heart out of her chest. 6 months of grinding work, of patching together an existence for herself and Fana. The wound was no longer raw, but it had scarred over into a hard knot of resolve. She had stopped dreaming of penthouses and Porsches. Her dreams were smaller, more tangible now. To save enough to rent a small storefront, to hang a sign that read, "Adama's Hand," to fill a room with the vibrant colors of Ankara and the intricate beauty of her embroidery. It was a distant dream. After rent, utilities, and groceries, she was lucky to save $20 a week. But it was a dream that was hers alone. That day was particularly bleak. A relentless November rain had been falling for hours, turning the city gray and miserable. It was payday, a day that should have been a small relief, but Adama felt only the familiar weight of anxiety. Her paycheck from the department store was $482.31 after taxes. She went to the bank and cashed it. Immediately, she put $250 in an envelope labeled rent. Then she paid the electric bill online, $78.45. She refilled her bus pass, $30. She bought Fana's asthma medication, $45. Suddenly, the crisp bills had dwindled to a meager handful. She was left with $78.86 to last her and Fana for the entire week. Her stomach rumbled. She hadn't eaten since the slice of toast she'd had for breakfast 12 hours ago. Her first thought, as always, was of Fana. She wanted to give her daughter one good, celebratory meal, a taste of home. She walked to the small African market 2 blocks from her apartment, the rain plastering her thin jacket to her skin. The smell of ginger and smoked fish greeted her like an old friend. She carefully selected her items, calculating the cost in her head with each choice. A small bag of rice, a can of tomato paste, 1 onion, 2 cloves of garlic, a single precious Scotch bonnet pepper, and for the celebration, 2 plump chicken thighs from the butcher counter. Her total came to $14.82. A painful indulgence, but the thought of Fana's happy face as she ate a proper plate of jollof rice made it worth it. Clutching the plastic grocery bag, she began the walk home. The rain was coming down harder now, cold and biting. The streetlights cast blurry halos on the wet pavement. As she rounded the corner onto her street, she saw him. He was sitting on the drenched sidewalk, his back against the brick wall of a closed laundromat. He was huddled into himself, a man trying to shrink from the world. He wore thin, tattered clothes, a threadbare sweatshirt and jeans with holes in the knees that were soaked through. His hair was matted, his face gaunt and shadowed with several days' worth of stubble. He wasn't begging. He had no sign, no cup. He just sat there, shivering, his eyes closed as if in pain. Adama's first instinct was to hurry past. She clutched her grocery bag tighter. This was Fana's dinner. It was their one good meal for the week. She had nothing to spare. Not a dollar, not a moment. She thought of David, of his cold dismissal of her life. The world was hard. You had to look out for yourself. She took a few quick steps, her eyes fixed on her apartment building just down the block. But then she stopped. She saw the man's hands. They were trembling, not just from the cold, but from what looked like utter despair. He looked completely and utterly broken, defeated. Her mother's voice echoed in her mind, as clear as if she were standing right beside her. The hand that gives, gathers. Adama looked at the grocery bag in her hand. The chicken thighs, the rice, the ingredients for a meal of warmth and comfort. She looked at the man, a stranger shivering in the rain. A battle raged within her. It was a war between the harsh reality of her life and the unwavering compassion of her soul. The reality was stark. If she gave this food away, she and Fana would be eating bread and watery soup for the next few days. The compassion was a quiet, insistent whisper. This man is suffering. He is someone's son. He is a human being at the end of his rope. For a long minute, she stood frozen on the sidewalk, the rain dripping from her hair onto her face, mingling with tears she didn't realize she was crying. Then, with a deep breath that settled the war inside her, she turned around. She walked back and stood in front of the man. He didn't look up. Adama knelt, the cold concrete seeping through the thin fabric of her pants. "Sir?" she said softly. He flinched, as if expecting a blow or a harsh word. Slowly, he opened his eyes. They were a startlingly clear blue, but they were hollow, filled with a profound emptiness that shocked her. He looked at her, his expression a mixture of confusion and wariness. Adama didn't say much. Words felt inadequate. Instead, she held out the plastic grocery bag. "I was just on my way to make dinner," she said, her voice gentle. "But I think you need this more than I do. There's chicken, rice, everything you need for a good meal. Do you have somewhere you can cook it?" He just stared at the bag, then back at her face, as if he couldn't comprehend what was happening. He shook his head slowly, a barely perceptible movement. "No," he whispered, his voice a dry rasp. Adama's heart clenched. Of course he didn't. She made a decision. "Come with me," she said. "My apartment is just there. It's warm. I'll make the food for you. You can eat with my daughter and me." The man's eyes widened. A flicker of something, disbelief, suspicion, crossed his face. He started to shake his head again. "No, I couldn't. I'm a mess. I can't impose." She offered him a small, tired smile. "It's not an imposition. It's just a meal. My mother always said there's always room for one more at the table. Please, you'll catch your death out here." She stood up and held out her hand. For a long moment, he just looked at her outstretched hand. It was a hand that was not soft or manicured. It was the hand of a worker,
calloused and strong. It was a hand offering not pity, but solidarity. Hesitantly, as if he hadn't felt a kind human touch in a lifetime, he reached out and took it. His hand was freezing cold. She helped him to his feet. He was unsteady, and he leaned on her for a moment. "I'm Adama," she said. He looked down, unable to meet her gaze. "Kai," he mumbled. "Just Kai." She led him to her apartment building, acutely aware of the stares from a neighbor peering through her blinds. She didn't care. She helped the man up the 3 flights of stairs. His breathing labored. When they entered her small, warm apartment, the contrast with the cold street was immense. Fauna ran to the door, her face bright. "Mama!" She stopped short when she saw the stranger, her eyes wide. She hid behind Adama's legs. Adama smoothed her daughter's hair. "Fauna, my love, this is Kai. He's going to have dinner with us tonight." She looked at Kai. "This is my daughter, Fauna." Kai managed a weak, shy smile for the little girl. "Hello, Fauna." Adama settled Kai on their only comfortable chair, a worn floral armchair she'd found on the curb. She gave him a dry towel and one of her late father's old sweaters, which he kept in a chest. While he dried off, she went into the tiny kitchen and began to cook. The familiar motions were a comfort: washing the rice, chopping the onion and garlic, browning the chicken. The apartment filled with the rich, fragrant aroma of the jollof rice. It was the smell of home, of love, of celebration. Fauna, her shyness fading, sat at the small kitchen table, watching her mother and chattering about her day at school. When the food was ready, Adama served 3 plates. She put the largest portion, with the 2 biggest pieces of chicken, on a plate and set it before Kai. She gave Fauna the other thigh, and took for herself only a small portion of rice. They ate in a comfortable silence, broken only by Fauna's occasional questions. Kai ate slowly at first, then with a hunger that was painful to watch. He ate as if he hadn't had a real meal in weeks. With every bite, some of the tension seemed to leave his body. The hollowness in his eyes began to recede, replaced by a dawning wonder. He kept glancing at Adama, at Fauna, at the warm, clean apartment, as if he had stumbled into a different dimension. When he finished, he put his fork down and looked at the empty plate. He didn't say anything. He just stared at it. Then, to Adama's shock, his shoulders began to shake. A single tear tracked a clean path through the grime on his cheek. Then another. Soon, he had his head in his hands, and he was weeping. Not loudly, but with deep, silent, racking sobs that seemed to be pulled from the very core of his being. Fauna looked at him, her face full of concern, and then at her mother. Adama's heart broke for him. She went and knelt by his chair again. She didn't say, "Don't cry," or "It's okay." She just placed her hand gently on his shoulder. She let him cry. After a few minutes, his sobs subsided. He lifted his head, his face wet, his blue eyes red-rimmed, but clearer than they had been before. He looked at Adama, and his voice was thick with emotion. "Why?" he whispered. "Why would you do this for me? A stranger." Adama thought for a moment. She thought of David's cruelty, of her mother's wisdom, of her own exhaustion. "Because no one should feel that alone," she said simply. "Everyone deserves to be seen. Everyone deserves a warm meal." He continued to look at her, a profound and unreadable expression on his face. He didn't tell her he was Kalen Adebayo, a man who had not felt seen for his soul in over a decade. He didn't tell her he had walked out of his sterile,
12,000 square foot mansion that afternoon, driven by a soul-crushing loneliness, and just started walking until he collapsed. He didn't tell her that his test, to find one person who would show kindness without wanting something in return, was a desperate, last-ditch effort to prove to himself that goodness still existed in the world. He didn't tell her any of that. He just nodded and whispered, "Thank you, Adama. Thank you." That night, something shifted in the universe. A plate of rice, given with an open heart, had set in motion a chain of events that would change everything. But neither of them knew that yet. He simply thanked her again and left, walking back into the night, no longer a broken man, but a man with a purpose. He had found her. The next day, as Adama was leaving for work, she saw an old, beat-up Toyota Tacoma parked across the street. A man was leaning against it, watching her building. It was Kai. He wasn't dressed as a beggar anymore. He wore clean, simple work clothes, jeans and a flannel shirt, but he still had that lost look in his eyes. He saw her and straightened up, looking nervous. "Hi," he said, walking over. I just wanted to thank you again for last night, and to return this." He held out her father's sweater, neatly folded. She took it. "You didn't have to do that. I hope you're feeling better." "I am," he said, a small, genuine smile touching his lips for the first time. "A lot better." He hesitated. "I'm a handyman," he said, a story he had prepared. "Or, I was. Work has been slow. I was wondering, do you have any odd jobs I could do? A leaky faucet, a shelf that needs hanging, anything, to pay you back for your kindness." Adama looked at him. Her faucet in the bathroom had been dripping for months, a steady, maddening plink, plink, plink that she had learned to tune out. She couldn't afford a plumber. "I do have a leaky faucet," she admitted, "but I can't pay you much." "I don't care about the money," he said quickly. "I just want to help." So she let him. He followed her up to the apartment, carrying a small, worn toolbox that he'd had his driver, Marcus, purchase that morning from a pawn shop. While he worked on the faucet, Fauna sat on the floor, watching him with curious eyes. He was gentle and patient with her, answering her endless questions about his tools. He fixed the faucet in under an hour. The silence in the bathroom was a blessing. When he was done, Adama offered him the only payment she could afford, a cup of hot, sweet tea. They sat on her tiny balcony, which overlooked a bleak alleyway. But in that moment, it felt like a veranda. He didn't talk much about himself, offering only vague details about growing up in a small town and moving to the city for a fresh start. Instead, he asked about her. He asked about Fauna. He asked about Senegal, and he asked about the sewing machine in the corner. His questions were not intrusive. They were genuinely curious. He listened, truly listened, as she spoke about her dream of opening her own shop. He looked at some of the pieces she was working on, a set of embroidered pillowcases for a small online order. He touched the intricate stitching with a sense of awe. "This is incredible," he said. "You're a true artist, Adama." No one had ever called her an artist before. Not like that. Not with that tone of quiet reverence. Coming from this humble handyman, the words meant more to her than any compliment David had ever given her. This became their routine. A few times a week, Kai would show up in his old truck. He never asked for anything. He would just find something to fix. He repaired the wobbly leg on her kitchen table. He rehung a cabinet door that was falling off its hinges. He painted Fauna's small bedroom a bright, cheerful yellow, a can of paint he claimed a client had left over. He started bringing little things for Fauna, a coloring book, a small bag of her favorite mango candies. He never brought anything extravagant. His gifts were small, thoughtful, and always felt earned. He would help Fauna with her reading homework, his large frame folded onto one of her tiny chairs. He would listen to her read, his expression soft and encouraging. He was becoming a quiet, steady presence in their lives. Adama found herself looking forward to the sight of his old truck parked on her street. She found herself saving him a cup of tea, a piece of fried plantain. She was starting to feel something she hadn't felt in a long time. Safe. One Saturday afternoon, as Kai was helping Adama carry her groceries up the stairs, they ran into David. He was coming down, dressed in a crisp suit, his new fiancée, Cassandra, clinging to his arm. David stopped dead when he saw Adama. Then his eyes flickered to Kai, taking in his worn jeans and flannel shirt, and a cruel, knowing smirk spread across his face. "Well, well, Adama," he said, his voice loud enough for the whole hallway to hear. "I see you found someone more on your level." He looked Kai up and down with open contempt. "Let me guess. He fixes things?" Cassandra giggled, a high, unpleasant sound. Adama felt a flash of hot anger, but she pushed it down. She looked straight into David's eyes, her gaze steady. "Yes, he does," she said, her voice calm and clear. "He fixes what's broken." Kai stood silently beside her, his expression unreadable, his body tense. David laughed. "How touching. Listen, I was actually coming to see you. I heard through the grapevine you were still struggling. I was going to offer you a little charity. Maybe $100 to help you out?" He pulled out his wallet, a gesture of pure performance. "But it looks like you're doing just fine with," he waved a dismissive hand at Kai, "your handyman." Before Kai could react, Adama stepped forward. "We don't need your charity, David. We are fine." She adjusted the grocery bag in her arm. "Now, if you'll excuse us, we have to go put our food away."
Her dignity was a shield. It was so absolute, so unbreachable, that it left David momentarily speechless. He just stared at her, then at Kai, who hadn't said a word, but whose presence felt like a mountain. David scoffed, grabbed Cassandra's arm, and pushed past them down the stairs. Upstairs, in the safety of the apartment, Adama's hands were trembling as she put the groceries away. She was furious, humiliated, and shaken. Kai came and stood beside her. He didn't touch her. He just said, "I'm sorry you had to go through that." She shook her head, not looking at him. "It's not your fault. It's mine. I chose him once." Kai's voice was soft. "He doesn't see you, Adama. He never did. He looked at you and saw what you lacked. He never saw what you have." She finally looked at him, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "And what do I have, Kai? I have a tiny apartment and 2 jobs that are killing me."
"You have a heart that's bigger than this whole city," he said, his voice full of a conviction that stunned her. "You have a gift in your hands that could build an empire. And you have a daughter who adores you. You have everything that matters." In that moment, looking into the eyes of this simple, kind handyman, Adama felt more seen and more valued than she ever had in her entire life. She was falling in love, not with a dream of a future, but with the reality of a good, quiet man who saw the queen in her when she was dressed in rags. 3 months had passed since that first rainy night. 3 months of shared meals, quiet conversations, and small acts of kindness. Kai had become an integral part of their small family. He and Fauna had their own private jokes. He and Adama had a comfortable intimacy that needed few words. She trusted him completely. She had told him all about David, about her past, about her dreams for her fashion line. He had listened, always listened, and encouraged her. He had even helped her set up a proper website to sell her embroidered goods, claiming a friend owed him a favor. Orders had started to trickle in, more than ever before. For the first time, her dream felt within reach. One sunny Tuesday afternoon, Kai showed up at her door. He seemed different, nervous. "Adama, can you come with me?" he asked. "There's something I need to show you, something I need to tell you." She was hesitant. "I have to pick up Fana from school in 2 hours." "It won't take long," he promised. "Please." There was an urgency in his voice she had never heard before. She trusted it. She trusted him. She got her jacket and followed him down to his old, battered Toyota Tacoma. The truck's engine rumbled to life with a familiar cough. He didn't drive toward the industrial part of town where she assumed he lived.
Instead, he got on the highway and headed toward the hills, toward the exclusive, tree-lined suburbs where the houses were hidden behind formidable gates and old money. Adama grew confused. "Kai, where are we going?" "Just a little further," he said, his knuckles white as he gripped the steering wheel. He was radiating a nervous energy that was completely foreign to him. He turned onto a private road marked by an understated stone pillar. The road wound through a dense forest of oak trees. Finally, they came to a stop before a pair of immense, wrought iron gates. The gates were a work of art, designed to look like the branches of a baobab tree. "What is this place?" Adama asked, bewildered. Kai didn't answer. He pressed a button on a small remote on his visor. The massive gates swung open silently. He drove through, and the gates closed behind them. The driveway was long and curved, and then the house came into view. It wasn't a house. It was a palace, a sprawling masterpiece of modern architecture, all glass and cedar and stone, nestled into the hillside as if it had grown there. It overlooked the entire city, a breathtaking panorama sparkling below them. Adama's mouth was dry. "Kai, whose house is this? Do you work here?" He parked the truck, the old dented Tacoma looking absurdly out of place in front of the architectural marvel, and turned off the engine. He finally looked at her. His blue eyes were full of fear and hope. "It's my house, Adama," he said softly. Her mind couldn't process the words. She just stared at him. A joke. It had to be a joke. She let out a nervous laugh. "Very funny, Kai. Did your rich client let you borrow the keys for the afternoon? Is this some kind of prank?" He shook his head, his expression deadly serious. "My name isn't Kai. I mean, it is. It's my middle name. My full name is Kalen Adebayo." The name hit her like a physical blow. Kalen Adebayo. The billionaire. The tech phantom. She had seen his picture once in a magazine at the diner. The man in the magazine had been sharp, severe, dressed in a tailored suit. He looked nothing like the gentle, flannel-clad man sitting next to her. But now, looking at him, really looking at him, she could see it. The same intense blue eyes, the same strong jawline, now clean-shaven. As if on cue, the front door of the mansion opened, and a tall, impeccably dressed man walked out. He had a dry, world-weary expression. He approached the driver's side of the truck. "Mr. Adebayo," he said, his voice a polite monotone. "Your mother has called 3 times. She said to remind you that the hand that gives also needs to learn how to use a phone." Kalen winced. "Thank you, Marcus. That will be all." Marcus, the loyal companion and long-suffering head of his security, gave Adama a brief, curious glance, and then retreated back into the house. Adama felt like she was in a dream. She couldn't breathe. "Mr. Adebayo?" She turned to him, her voice a whisper. "The truck? The handyman clothes? The laundromat?" Kalen's carefully constructed composure finally broke. His eyes filled with tears,
the same raw emotion she had seen that first night. It was all real, Adama. The loneliness, the despair. I had just finalized a divorce. A woman who I thought loved me, but who only loved what I could buy her. It left me hollow. I felt like my entire life was a transaction. I started to believe that no one could see me, the man behind the money. That day, I was at my lowest point. I walked out of this house and I just broke. The beggar on the street, that wasn't an act. That was how I felt, utterly bankrupt in my soul. I sat on that curb as a test, I guess, a desperate prayer to see if anyone at all, would look at a man with nothing and see a human being. He reached over and took her hand. And then you came. You, who had so little. You didn't just give me a few dollars. You knelt on the wet ground. You looked me in the eye. And you offered me everything you had. Your daughter's dinner. You brought me into your home. You gave me warmth and dignity. Adama, that plate of jollof rice. It was the most valuable thing anyone has ever given me. It saved my life. I had to know you. I had to know the woman with that kind of heart. So I became Kai. I had to know that you would care for Kai, the struggling handyman, before I could ever trust you with Kalen, the billionaire. Adama pulled her hand away, her head spinning. She looked around at the opulent house, at the man beside her, and she started to laugh. It was a wild, hysterical laugh that bordered on a sob. A handyman? In a 30-year-old Toyota? And I believed you. You, with your pawn shop toolbox. She laughed until tears streamed down her face. Kalen watched her, his own tears falling freely. When her laughter subsided, she looked at him, her expression turning serious.
Why me?
She asked, the question that had been burning in her heart. I have nothing. I'm a dishwasher, a single mother from a tiny village in Senegal. Why me? Kalen moved closer, his gaze intense and unwavering. He cupped her face in his hands. Because you have nothing? Adama, you have everything. You have a strength I've never seen. You have a gift in those hands that is pure magic. You have a heart that is so full of grace, it brought me to my knees. You didn't see a beggar. You saw a man. You didn't see a handyman. You saw a friend. You see people for who they are, not for what they have. That is the rarest, most priceless quality in the world. I don't love you in spite of you having nothing. I love you because you have everything that is real. He leaned in and kissed her, a kiss that was not about passion, but about a profound and sacred recognition. It was a kiss that sealed a promise made over a plate of rice. Adama cried, but for the first time in years, they were tears not of pain or struggle, but of overwhelming, unbelievable joy. She was finally home. 1 year later, the grand ballroom of the Four Seasons. The air is electric. This is the scene from the beginning, but now it is imbued with the full weight of the story that has led to this moment. Adama stands on the stage, a vision in her golden gown. The dress is her own creation, the flagship piece from her new, wildly successful couture line, Adama's Hand. The brand, funded and supported by Kalen, had become an international phenomenon. It was celebrated not just for its beauty, but for its mission. Every piece was handmade by immigrant women in a state-of-the-art workshop Adama had built in her old neighborhood. Women who were paid a generous living wage and given a chance to build their own dreams. But the most remarkable detail of her gown is invisible to the audience. Woven into the intricate embroidery over her heart is a single, almost hidden, red thread. A thread the color of tomato and pepper. A symbol of the jollof rice. A secret she shared only with the man standing beside her. Kalen Adebayo holds the Breakthrough Entrepreneur of the Year award. He looks out at the audience, at the sea of powerful, wealthy faces, and his eyes land for a moment on David Dubois. David is a ghost at the feast. His engagement to Cassandra had imploded spectacularly after her father discovered David had been leveraging his name in a series of reckless, failed investments. His strategic move had backfired, leaving him fired, disgraced, and on the verge of bankruptcy. He had come to the awards tonight on a ticket begged from a former colleague, hoping to network, to claw his way back. He had not known Adama would be here. Seeing her on that stage, next to that man, was like a physical torment. Every cheer for her was a nail in his coffin. Kalen begins his speech, his voice resonating with quiet power. "We are here tonight to celebrate success," he says. "We measure success in profit margins, in market share, in units sold. We quantify it, we chart it, we project it. But I've learned recently that the most important metrics in life are the ones that can't be put on a spreadsheet." He pauses, his eyes finding Adama's. "A year ago, I was a very successful man. I had everything a person could want, and yet I felt a poverty so profound it almost erased me. It was a poverty of the soul. I had forgotten the value of simple, human connection. I had forgotten how to trust. I had forgotten what it felt like to be seen for who I am, not for what I have." The room is rapt. This is a side of the reclusive billionaire no one has ever seen. "And then," Kalen continues, his voice thick with emotion, "at my lowest point, I met a woman who changed everything. This woman was, by the world's standards, poor. She worked 2 jobs to support her daughter. She worried about rent. She counted every dollar. But she possessed a wealth I couldn't even fathom. A wealth of character, a wealth of compassion, a wealth of grace." He tells the story. He doesn't name the street. He doesn't say the word beggar. He just paints the picture. A man, lost and invisible. A woman who stopped when everyone else walked past. A woman who looked at a complete stranger and offered him not her spare change, but her only meal. "She took me into her home," Kalen says, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "She, who had so little, shared her table with me. She gave me the most delicious meal I have ever eaten in my life." He lifts his head and looks directly at Adama. "The world measures wealth in billions, but that night, I learned that true wealth is measured in a single plate of shared rice. It is measured in the courage it takes to be kind in a cruel world." In the audience, David feels a wave of nausea. The rice. He remembers her excitement about that special meal. He had mocked her for it. The memory is an acid in his gut. Kalen raises the Crystal Award. "The woman I am honoring tonight has built an incredible business. She is empowering women. She is changing the face of fashion. But that is not why she is my hero. She is my hero because she is a testament to the fact that the greatest power in the world is a generous heart." He turns to her. "Adama Diop, you are the wealthiest person I have ever known. It is my profound honor to present you with this award." The ballroom erupts. The applause is thunderous. People are on their feet. It's not just polite clapping. It's a genuine, emotional ovation. Adama steps to the microphone, tears shining in her eyes. She looks out at the crowd, but she is speaking to the woman she used to be. The woman crying on the bus. The woman taping a proverb to her sewing machine. "Thank you," she says, her voice trembling but clear. "Thank you, Kalen. My mother, in a small village in Senegal, once told me, Joche de am Njarin. The hand that gives, gathers. I never understood what it truly meant until I met a man who needed a meal more than I did. I learned that what you give away is what you truly keep. Thank you. She looks at Kalen, her love for him a brilliant, shining light. The crowd roars. David Dubois does not clap. He sits frozen, a statue of regret, as his wife glares at him, her expression a mixture of fury and disgust. "You knew her?" she hisses. "You knew her and you let her go?" He has no answer. His public humiliation is silent, internal, and absolute. He is not a victim of revenge. He is simply a casualty of his own character, forced to watch the woman he deemed worthless be crowned a queen. The year following the awards was a whirlwind of beautiful growth. Adama's Ham became a global brand, with flagship stores in Paris, New York, and London. But Adama never forgot where she came from. The heart of her operation remained the workshop in her old neighborhood, which she expanded, creating hundreds more jobs. She established the Fana Foundation, a nonprofit that provided childcare, language classes, and legal aid for her immigrant employees. She was not just a boss, she was a matriarch. She knew every woman's name, every child's birthday. Her office was not in a high-rise tower, but in a small room at the back of the workshop, the sound of sewing machines a constant, comforting hum. She and Kalen married in a simple ceremony on the grounds of their estate, with only Fana, Marcus, and Adama's mother flown in from Senegal as witnesses. Adama wore a simple white dress she had sewn herself. Kalen wore a simple linen suit. They exchanged vows they had written themselves, promising to always see the person, not the possession. For their honeymoon, they didn't fly to an exotic island. They spent 2 weeks in Adama's home village, where Kalen, the billionaire, sat with the elders, ate tiboujen with his hands, and learned to say, "I love you," in Wolof. They were happy. It wasn't a fairy tale happiness, full of balls and glass slippers. It was a real happiness, built on mutual respect, gentle humor, and the shared memory of a rainy night. On weekends, they still drove the old Toyota Tacoma to a local park, where Kalen would push Fana on the swings, his laughter echoing in the open air. The truck, Kalen explained, was his touchstone. It reminded him of who he was when he had nothing and who Adama loved. As for David, his fall was as swift as it was predictable. Abandoned by his wealthy fiancée and blacklisted in the financial world, he lost everything. The sleek apartment, the tailored suits, the arrogant smirk. It all vanished. He ended up working as a valet at a high-end downtown restaurant, a job that was a daily torment, parking the cars of the men he once aspired to be. One sweltering summer evening, about a year after the awards, a familiar old Toyota Tacoma pulled up. David's heart stopped. Kalen Adebayo got out of the driver's side. Adama got out of the passenger side, holding Fana's hand. They were laughing about something, looking for all the world like any other happy family out for a treat. David's first instinct was to hide, to run, but he was trapped in his red valet vest. Adama saw him. Her laughter died. She stopped and just looked at him. There was no triumph in her eyes, no anger, only a flicker of a sad, distant memory. David stood frozen, braced for a cruel word, a look of contempt, anything. He deserved it. Kalen put a protective hand on Adama's arm, his expression hardening as he recognized the man who had hurt her so deeply. But Adama shook her head gently. She walked over to the valet stand. David couldn't meet her eyes. He stared at the pavement, his face burning with a shame so profound it felt like a physical illness. Adama didn't say his name. She just said, "It's a hot night." She reached into her purse, pulled out a $20 bill, and held it out to him. "Go get yourself a cold drink when you have a break," she said. Her voice was not pitying. It was just calm, devastatingly calm. It was an act of grace so unexpected, so unearned, that it broke him in a way her anger never could have. He finally looked up at her, his eyes swimming with tears. The woman he had called a dead end was offering him kindness. He couldn't speak. He just took the bill, his hand trembling. "Thank you," he managed to choke out. Adama simply nodded, turned, and walked back to her husband and daughter. As they walked away, he heard Fana's small voice ask, "Mama, who was that man?" And he heard Adama's gentle reply, "Just someone I used to know, my love. Just someone I used to know." David stood there, the $20 bill clutched in his hand, and watched them disappear around the corner. A family built on a foundation he could never understand. He had not been defeated by revenge. He had been annihilated by grace. In the end, a story is not just a sequence of events. It is a lesson wrapped in a narrative. The world will tell you to accumulate, to acquire, to build walls around your heart and your assets. It will tell you that worth is measured in numbers, in your bank account, on the scale, in the square footage of your home. But the truest stories, the ones that echo in the soul, teach a different lesson. They teach that a heart is not measured by what it has, but by what it is willing to give away. True poverty isn't an empty pocket. It's an empty spirit. Adama Diop, with her calloused hands and her $20 savings, was never poor. She was a dragon guarding a treasure of infinite kindness. Kalen Adebayo, with his billions, was the true beggar, starving for something real. Their story reminds us that the greatest investment you can ever make is not in stocks or in real estate, but in a simple, unprompted act of human decency. It is the only currency that never loses its value, the only wealth that you can truly take with you. For what is a kingdom if you have no one to share it with? And what is a simple meal if not a kingdom when it is shared with love? If this story moved your heart, subscribe and hit that notification bell, because every tale has a lesson, and Alfred's Folktales never forgets.